This is my new fridge, the APL35 from Iceco. And to be clear, there was nothing wrong with my previous fridge. It was still working. I had it since 2020. Now this is an upgrade in a number of ways, but two of the biggest upgrades for me are simply the fact that it is a larger capacity and it's a dual zone that has a freezer section, which is something I have wanted for a long time. Now those of you familiar with my build will notice that I have indeed changed my setup here where my fridge is. So for my regular viewers, if you're curious about what I did here, I will talk about the installation process that I went through here a little later in the video, and you will find chapter links down at the bottom of the player or in the description below if you want to jump forward. First, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the fridge itself. In full disclosure here, Iceco did provide me with the fridge to test and review. They are not paying me to produce this video. Now, those of you who regularly watch my channel know that I am not constantly hawking products, and I am not trying to sell this to you either. I'm just telling you about it. The only partnerships I ever accept are with companies that I'm familiar with, that I've previously checked out, that I feel assured are producing a quality product that I think you, my viewers, would find interesting and would be satisfied with. Now, I've watched my buddy Jason running Iceco fridges and freezers in his van for some years now. They have withstood the considerable abuse that he puts them through. They reassured me about the quality of this fridge and made me feel good about testing it out and sharing it with you. Additionally, Iceco has not given me any sort of a script or anything to put into this video. These are entirely my words, my thoughts, my impressions. And a little later in the video, I am going to talk about some things that I wish were different about the design of this fridge.
The Iceco APL35 is a dual-zone 12-volt refrigerator. As you would guess from the name, it has a capacity of 35 liters, which strikes a nice balance between keeping the fridge compact overall, but still having enough room inside. The larger compartment easily accommodates tall items such as wine bottles and milk cartons. The APL35 is indeed fully sheathed in aluminum. No worries about cracking any plastic on this one, and I imagine that shiny metal may actually reflect off some radiant heat and further improve the efficiency of the fridge. The handles feel sturdy and the corners sport some extra reinforcement. The APL35 comes with a DC power cord with cigarette lighter plug for running off your vehicle or a power station, but also includes an AC power supply, so you can also run this in your house or pre-cool the fridge at home before leaving on a trip. The control panel is intuitive and simple to use. You can set the target temperatures of the larger compartment separate from the smaller compartment, and either compartment can be set to any temperature from -7 to 50 degrees, so you can use the whole thing as a freezer or use the whole thing just as a fridge, depending upon your needs of the moment.
Despite the fairly beefy looking build, this actually is remarkably lightweight, weighs in at 32 pounds, really easy to move around.
Now, this isn't exactly a budget fridge, but it is more affordable than some of the bigger name brand fridges that you see on some of the bigger name brand YouTube channels. Iceco does equip their fridges with the CCOP compressor. Comes with a 5-year warranty on the compressor itself. And don't quote me on this, but I suspect that that is the same compressor brand that you find in the more expensive fridges.
One of the many things that stood out to me about the APL35 was the fact that the lid stays open at whatever position you put it in. The lid on my previous fridge was just floppy, and if I wasn't able to get it all the way open or leaning back a little bit, I would have to hold it with one hand or sort of hold it with my head while I tried to dig around. And this like hinge that just holds the door open wherever you put it is fantastic. Another detail I really appreciate about the APL35 are these latches on the lid that lock it positively closed. This was something that had been an issue for me on a number of occasions with my previous fridge, in that sometimes I would put some stuff away in there, close the lid, not realize that something was piled up just a little too high, and that lid would sit for who knows how long open, basically letting warm air in and leaking my cold air out of there. So these latches are a really nice touch to keep this lid positively closed no matter what happens, or if you're going down a bumpy road or anything that may result in that lid not being fully closed. Now you don't have to worry about it.
A bonus feature I didn't even realize this had when I ordered it is that it has lights that come on when you open the lid. I pretty commonly end up making dinner after the sun goes down, and I love that I no longer have to fumble around in the dark to find the ingredients I'm after.
Oh, hello, Fridge Cam.
Overall, I'm thrilled to have the additional space. With my previous fridge at about 23 liters, I could barely get food for a week-long trip in there just for myself. And even there, I would have to keep most of my beverages not stored in the fridge. And if I would take one cold beverage out, then I would have to take another warm cold beverage and put it in there in its place. You know, I'd have to sort of circulate through my beverages. Here, I have definitely got enough room to put a 6-pack of whatever in there on top of at least a week's worth of groceries. Or if I were to do a week-long trip with one of my kids, unlikely, but I feel I could easily accommodate 2 people on a week-long trip with the capacity of this fridge.
Now, camping or not camping, I generally avoid devices that require some kind of an app to operate. And this fridge actually does not require the app, but this is one of those cases where I'm actually really happy to have the app, because I'm really bad about getting to camp and forgetting to switch my fridge from truck power to Jackery power. And with the app, I can just open the app and I can see we're running at 35 degrees. Perfect.
Because of how I had to install the fridge in my truck, the control panel is completely inaccessible, so the app is actually essential for me to operate and monitor the fridge. The app connects to the fridge via Bluetooth, and it has worked impeccably for me. It's very intuitive to use, and I appreciate that they haven't overbuilt too many features into the app. It simply operates as a remote access to the control panel. I can turn the fridge on or off. I can set the target temperature of the large compartment and separately set the target temperature of the small compartment. And I can see at a glance what the temperature sensor in each compartment is reading.
So I was going to get some ice cream to take with me on this trip and make use of the freezer, but I forgot. So I'm actually just gonna go in the app here, and we don't need this to run so cold, right? So we can just, let's just set this to the same as the fridge. And there's no need to use the energy on this trip for the freezer. Next time I'll get some ice cream.
Now, if you're like me and you go out camping with any regularity at all, moving to a fridge from an ice chest is an absolute, and I hate to use the word, but it is a total game changer. I moved from a cooler to a fridge in 2020, and I cannot imagine doing this without having a fridge now. It's so reassuring to just know that your cold food is cold. You don't have to worry about ice melting. You don't have to worry about water collecting in the bottom of a cooler and emptying that out, needing to run into town to find more ice. It is absolutely fantastic. These fridges do not consume a huge amount of power.
Another thing I love about having a fridge in my vehicle is that even just around town, I can keep my groceries at a safe, cold temperature while running additional errands.
Now, do you need a freezer to go out camping? No, absolutely not. Is it nice if you're out on a week-long trip? For me, I am thrilled. One of the biggest anxieties I have on my week-long trips is having raw meat in my fridge and being a little bit concerned with how well my old fridge at least was keeping that meat cold enough. So I would rush in the early part of my week-long trips to cook all of my meals that involved fresh meat. And a lot of times I would tend to either buy some pre-cooked meat or pre-cook meat at home before a trip in order to not worry about carrying raw meat. I'm so excited to have a freezer because I could actually put some frozen meat in the freezer and dole it out over the course of a week-long or a 10-day trip and not have any concerns at all about raw meat going bad or the packaging possibly getting punctured and oozing a little bit of that raw meat juice out into the rest of the fridge. I'm also a pretty big fan of Trader Joe's. I buy a lot of groceries there, and they have a lot of interesting frozen prepared meals that I have experimented with for camping, and they have good potential, but they're frozen, and so they always end up thawed if I take them on a trip. I like the idea that I can put a frozen meal or two in here and possibly have it just as a simple backup if I need it. The other thing that does sometimes happen is I end up with leftovers from a meal or some food in some way that I actually want to just bring back home, and I'm looking forward to having the ability to throw something in the freezer so I don't have to worry about it getting bad over the next several days. My friend Jason of Primal Outdoors, he often goes out and goes fishing and does other things like that on his trips, and he actually uses his Iceco freezer to instantly preserve some of those proteins that he catches so that he can use them long term down the road. I personally don't really do a lot of fishing or anything like that, but that is an interesting potential for having a freezer. Some people simply like having ice cubes. I do have a number of friends who like to mix some really nice, interesting cocktails when they're out on the trails and camping. And while it's certainly absolutely not necessary in any way for a successful camping trip, it is nice. If you wanted to have ice cubes, you could have ice cubes.
I wanted to get a feel for how much power this would consume, but since the weather is getting colder, I decided to test this inside my house where it would be subject to warmer average temperatures. I loaded up the fridge with groceries similar to what I might typically pack for one of my week-long expeditions. Additionally, I've included some frozen foods in the freezer section and a tray of room temperature water to emulate the energy draw of making ice cubes. Charlie is of course supervising this operation. We're starting out with my Jackery 500 at 98%. When the compressor of the fridge runs, it actually only draws 36 watts. When the compressor cycles off, the fridge's electronics are only pulling about 2 watts. It's about 5:30 p.m. as we get this test underway.
Okay, it's about 3 hours later. Yeah, that's pretty much a little bit. It's almost completely frozen there. So the freezer is definitely doing its job, so it's clearly keeping the frozen food frozen. Everything's nice and cold in there.
And at this point, we've gone from 98% to 84% on this 500 watt power station. A little over 12 hours later the next morning, we've run the Jackery 500 down to 41%. Bear in mind that your power consumption percentage will vary depending on ambient temperatures and the capacity of your power station. This overnight test used about 60% of my Jackery 500. That would only be about a 30% drain on the 1000 watt unit in my truck that I actually use for my fridge.
Okay, so I've got the fridge set to 34 degrees on the normal side and set to 1 degrees on the freezer side. Now about 34 is where I found I would usually set my previous fridge, and that worked well. It's currently showing a reading of 23 degrees. But what I found with my previous fridge is that I would set it for about 34, 35 degrees, and I just left it there. And depending on where you were inside that cavity, one side closer to where the cooling coils were, I guess, things would get a little bit icy. On the other side and higher up in the fridge, things would be much warmer. So I would just sort of arrange my groceries accordingly. I don't have a thermometer that I can put in here, but I've put a stand-in grocery into each compartment, and I'm gonna read the temperature with my handy-dandy sensor gauge here. Yeah, see, so that in the main compartment is reading, focus on that, 37 degrees. Can you see that? Can you see that? 37 degrees. And in the freezer section, focus on that, 1 degree as indicated. The readout on the app is definitely showing lower than what the temperature in the fridge section actually is. I suppose there again, it just depends on where the temperature sensor is inside of that compartment. If it's closer to the cooling coils or whatever, it's reading lower. So I've got it set for 34. My grocery is at 37. That's about what I would expect. That's about where I would like my refrigerated groceries to be. I think with any 12 volt fridge, you have to use a little bit, get used to how it works, get used to the sort of slightly colder, slightly warmer zones, even within one single compartment. Even though the readout for the fridge compartment is not showing an accurate number, it's showing colder than what it actually is. The space in there is actually close to the temperature that I want it to be. So that's pretty much what I want to see. Now overall, I am really impressed and pleased with the design of this fridge. This is just about an ideal size and configuration for my uses. Probably the detail that bothers me the most is that the control panel is set low into one end of the fridge. Because of my configuration, it is completely hidden and inaccessible. Now, fortunately, the app works well, and I'm able to turn the fridge on and off, monitor the temperature, change the temperature, even change the eco setting and max cooling setting. Can do all that from the app. It's working fine. But I really wish, and this really applies to any fridge from any manufacturer, if this is where we access the fridge, man, I wish you guys could figure out some way to have the control panel be right where you're going to naturally be accessing the fridge anyway. Now I understand, there's insulation and there's a motor has to be someplace and the electronics and power supply stuff and all that. And so, that obviously all has to get fitted in there, and also having a practical usable space for the food itself. Nonetheless, my super skinny little phone can control this fridge. How hard would it be to have just electronics panel right here, right where you access the fridge? That would by far be the most desired improvement that I would see. Now, Iceco does offer slide outs for their fridges. In fact, they offered to let me have one for my installation. It doesn't make sense for me to have a slide out here. I would have had to completely reconfigure my entire back seat configuration here. So I declined the slide out. For some people that may make more sense, and for other people, depending on how they position their fridge in their vehicle, and a lot of people put them in the backs of their trucks or in a van someplace, a lot of people may have perfectly good access to that panel. But it is frustrating that I've got one spot that I can put this, and that panel is just utterly inaccessible. The only other little nitpick for me is that, well, I love the expanded capacity that I have here compared to my previous fridge. This is deep. It's a lot of space. And if I put all of my groceries and stuff in there, this sort of gets piled up, and it can get tricky to find and access stuff at the very bottom. It would be nice if there was some sort of basket or a couple of baskets or some way to somehow divide this space up. So maybe there is a top basket that I could just remove, set aside, and access stuff that's below, and put it back in there. Something, anything. When I first got the fridge, I actually went right to Amazon and tried to find something out there that existed that would work. I just could not find anything that was quite the right size or shape, divide this space up in a practical way, and allow me to access everything in there. So until I find something, it's going to be, a little bit of the digging again, sort of churning through, and then stuff on top kind of falls to the bottom. Oh, I suppose a third nitpick would be, I wish that the temperature sensor in the fridge compartment more accurately represented the actual temperature in the fridge compartment. Now, I feel like I can trust the fridge to maintain the proper temperature in there. I wish that when I looked at the app, it would tell me something that is closer to the reality. And again, obviously, you have warmer and cooler areas within a fridge compartment. The freezer section does seem to be reading accurately. It says it's 1 degree, and my temperature gauge says it was 1 degree. The temperature reading on the fridge side was off by, 15 degrees. So it would be nice if they figured out a way to position the temperature sensor or do something so that what you were getting on the app was an accurate picture of what was actually going on inside.
When I built this support for my fridge, I integrated these little plastic drawers, 3 sets of them. That's been great to organize a number of small things. Now, I'm not going to be able to keep those like that. We'll see if I can integrate a little bit of storage below the new Iceco fridge. Our regular viewers of my channel know that I just very recently deleted the other portion of my back seat and built a storage structure here. Now, I did all that before I knew I would be getting a new fridge. Now, had I known I would be getting a new fridge very, very shortly, I would have designed all this from the ground up as a single unit. I may have thought things out a little bit differently, but this 60% of my seat, this section has worked out really well on my recent trips, and I'm not going to tear it all apart. I still just need my fridge to be right here. So I've just plopped this into place for now just to kind of see how it works in the space. Oh man, that is a thing of beauty. This is really nice at this height. I can see well down into this fridge, because this is much deeper than my previous fridge. And Iceco does offer slide outs right on their website, and that would have been a nice solution here. You could slide right out this way, and that would be great to access from my kitchen area there. However, that's not going to work with what I've just built on the other half of the back seat, and I'm not quite ready to undo everything that I did just to have a slide out here. Whereas, you know, this layout for the fridge has been working for me for years, and so there's really no big loss there. Ultimately, this is probably the most efficient use of my space, but depending on your setup, one of Iceco's slide outs may actually be the most efficient way to use your space. So this is just a piece of this 3/4 inch plywood. I actually got this for free off of Craigslist a year or two ago. Got a bunch of it. I actually made some shelves in the garage out of it, and it just happens to be the perfect width, so I just had to cut it to length. I had to notch out where it's going to bolt to the seat anchor positions because it was a little too thick and the bolts didn't come up enough through there. And I've got these anchors. These were actually on the slide out that I made in the back of the truck before. Just had those sitting around, and so those will be tie downs for the fridge. And I'll paint this all black, but I'm just getting it all figured out and pieced together first. Okay, so with that now painted, I've got these tie downs bolted on. I've only done one on the back side because I'm also going to strap it to one of the anchor points in the truck. I just had a remnant of satin black paint, so just the part that's visible is painted with that, and that will be hidden by the fridge, so that's why it looks a little uneven. I'm just using these Harbor Freight lashing straps, these cam buckles, and feels like it's pretty solid. We'll see how that goes. And to keep this from lifting up at all, going down bumpy roads, I've just sort of bracketed it to the back side of my shelving there, and I've got some rubber stuck up in between here to keep that sort of wedged and padded. We'll see how that goes. I think that's going to be fine.
Obviously, in order to accommodate this larger fridge, I eliminated the drawers that I had below my old fridge. For now, I'm experimenting with this sort of seat back organizer to hold some of the things that I was accessing the most frequently from here. This isn't perfect, but we'll see how this goes. I've actually got a few other ideas for how I will accommodate this. Now, the other thing is that my Tailgater tire table that had my built-in burner, I used to carry it right here, riding just behind my driver's seat in front of my fridge. And that doesn't work anymore. And I knew that was going to be the case before they even sent this to me. I did all the measurements. I knew it was coming. I was already not completely happy with how that whole system was working for me. I thought it was a good idea, but in practice, I was disappointed with it. And getting this was kind of the final straw on the camel's back that convinced me that it was time to just rule that out and figure something else out.
Now you'll find a link in the description below if you want to take a look at this or their other fridges. And if you make a purchase from Iceco through my link, I may see a small benefit from that. That's very similar to if you click on it in my Amazon links or Yankum Ropes. My goal here is just to provide information that you may find useful. I'm not here to sell fridges. Even if some of you use my link and buy this fridge, I'm not going to see any significant benefits from that. The occasional product referral helps keep gas in the tank so I can get out on these trips that you guys like to watch.
If you have any questions about my new Iceco fridge or how I've installed it in my truck, don't hesitate to post in the comments below. And thank you for watching.